Architecture CodeX. If you want to see more, like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe.
Being a famous architect is kind of an oxymoron. There are very few architects whose names are known to the general public. But in the design world, which is composed of architects, interior designers, engineers, contractors, professors, and especially journalists, there are big names, and those names have power. To build Cardinal Stadium, at one point known as the University of Phoenix Stadium, currently State Farm Stadium, whatever they call that big building that houses football in Glendale, Arizona, to build the stadium, Bill Bidwell, owner of the Cardinal football team, and the stadium developers engaged famous architect Peter Eisenman in 1997. To make sure it could actually be built, they also engaged HOK, now Populous, who are experienced stadium builders. Eisenman was first listed in the book Five Architects, essentially self-published in 1975, which also included Richard Meyer, Michael Graves, Charles Gwathmey, and John Hejduk, all of whom went on to distinguished long careers. They became known as the New York Whites for all sorts of reasons. Eisenman might have been considered the most theoretically abstracted architect of the group. Peter Eisenman became known in the design world for his houses that had what he called negative spaces. Those were spaces into which you could see, but you could not enter. Like the New York Whites, he was big on non-materiality, white buildings that looked more like the foam core models they would make in the studio. His house number 2 was impractical for the Vermont climate, which you would think should be a major consideration. Of course, it went significantly over budget and was abandoned, the Vermont winters devouring it like maple syrup. A new owner bought it, changed it, and eventually completed it. His house number 6 was also so poorly detailed that it not only was delayed and went over budget, but it also had to be completely rebuilt a dozen years after it was originally finished. So why wouldn't you hire this guy to build your very expensive football stadium? Eisenman says his design for the Cardinal Stadium was inspired by West Valley barrel cactus because he needed a metaphor to design the stadium.
The West Valley is nothing to do with Native American, it's agricultural. And so we thought we wanted a completely different expression. And we looked around and found this barrel cactus, which is a segmented bubble-like cactus. Looks like a tomato with segments, right? And it's indigenous to this area. And so because they needed a metaphor, right? I mean, everybody needs a metaphor.
In another interview, he said he was inspired by the coil snakes of Arizona. Ultimately, this design inspiration was expressed in mostly segmented steel panels meant to reflect the color of the sky as the day progresses, because that's what reflective panels do. He also talks about how the stadium exterior is like a cupped hand that opens up the palm as it moves around the stadium. Notice that none of this has anything to do with a football fan sitting in the stands and watching the game. This is why HOK was hired. HOK has been the dominant force in stadium design for decades, designing such venues as Oriole Park at Camden Yards, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Coors Field, the new Yankee Stadium, Hong Kong Stadium, Wimbledon Center Court, and many others. Started in 1955 as Helmuth, Obata, and Kassenbaum, they grew through experience and acquisition. They joined with Lob Partnership in the 1980s. In 1983, they formed their sport division called HOK Sport Venue Event, dedicated to stadiums and convention centers. And in 2009, renamed themselves Populous, but it will always be HOK to me. They grew into the largest U.S. architecture and engineering firm in 2018 with 1,600 professionals and 24 offices spread across the globe. So what we see at Cardinal Stadium is a collaboration of sorts. Eisenman designing the face of the building and giving the building its theoretical metaphor motif,
because they needed a metaphor.
but probably had very little to do with the functioning parts of the stadium, and certainly had nothing to do with engineering the retractable roof or the movable field. The program, the wish list for a new major stadium, is a complex logistical nightmare. How do you optimize the number of seats and make sure everyone can see? What is the best slope for viewing, but also comfortable for people to walk? What happens to the slope as you get into the upper decks and people have to look down? What kind of passages, elevators, ramps, and escalators do you need to get people to and from their seats? How many toilets do you need? And will there ever be enough in the women's room at halftime? What about the locker rooms for both teams, the referees, and other sports that might use the stadium? What facilities would a car or boat show require? How do you get the food to all the concession stands and all the trash away from them? How do you get all the gear into the souvenir shops? Where are the loading docks for the food, the TV crews, the teams? And how do you make the stadium indestructible in case the wild, drunken fans of the losing team get angry? And I'm talking to you, Philadelphia Eagles fans! All this is why big-name, metaphor-driven architects are left out of the design process.
Because they needed a metaphor.
HOK has over the years developed the parameters, the best practices, the standards for stadium operations. Sure, you could backward engineer some of this data from previously built successful stadiums, or you could go right to the originators. HOK is not the only stadium architects around the world. There's HNTB and HKS, and many others that don't even begin with the letter H. But the essential lesson here is that the complexity of a good stadium is such that you don't want to risk $500 million on an architect who is preoccupied with bubble cactus.
Because they needed a metaphor.
What makes this stadium more exciting than others is that essentially the roof and the floor are retractable. Sections of the roof move on rails to open up the stadium to more sun. Even when the stadium is not completely enclosed, comfort is maintained with shade and air conditioning. Most impressive is the sliding 18.9 million pound tray that holds the natural grass football field. The concept and the engineering of this is a game-changing design approach. It is too early to tell if this will reverse the momentum of converting grass fields to artificial turf. The Cardinals can play on grass because the field is on a movable platform and can be removed from the stadium most of the time. This allows other events to occur at the stadium without damaging the field. Once outside the stadium, the grass is gently nurtured. Field grass turf might be considered an invasive species, as it requires much more water than would naturally occur in this region of Arizona. But infrastructure water projects, such as the Roosevelt Dam and the Arizona Canal, assured a steady water supply, and the region has already transformed from arid hostility into an agricultural center growing lettuce, melons, sugar beets, and cotton. So I have no complaints about the stadium design per se. I just find the relationship between the big-name architect and the architect of record to be an irritating one. For some reason, people think that creativity and competence are mutually exclusive. Did HOK really need Peter Eisenman to design this stadium at Glendale, Arizona? No. What value does attaching Peter Eisenman's name to the project add? None.
Because they needed a metaphor.
Like I said at the beginning of this video, outside the design world, there are very few people who even know who he is. Maybe a design journalist will be impressed and write a good review. But have you ever known a football fan refusing to go to a game just because they found the stadium's overarching metaphoric design derivative or non-contextual? I'm Michael Molinelli, and this is Architecture Codex.